Hi, Andy XL back with another NFXL podcast. Week three of the NFL is come and gone, so that puts us a sixth of the way through the regular season. So, who's had a good week and who's had a bad week in week three? This is obviously the third of these pieces I've done. So the questions here are: how many teams are basking in the ambiance of a 3-0 start, and how many are stinking the place up after an 0-3 start? Which teams sort of fancy pre-season are playing catch up after indifferent starts, and which teams are doing better than expected? Week three was an early pivotal point for teams' seasonal hopes. So, which teams had a good week and which teams had a bad week? Well, I haven't actually totted the numbers up from last week, but I had a bad week in terms of predictions, having got 13 and 14 right in weeks one and two, respectively. I think I was around 9 or 10, so just over 50%, which was a bad effort. But it was a really tricky week, and there were some results in there that many people wouldn't have called. So I'll be looking to get back on better form in week four, but I'll come back to that again in my week four preview, which will be coming up shortly. So let's start with this, having a look at the teams that had a good week. Well, top of my list this week are the Detroit Lions. The Lions' win over the Ravens in Baltimore on Monday Night Football was the best performance I've seen from a team this season and gets them back level at the top of the NFC North. And once again, looking like the team that the Packers and Vikings need to up their game if they're going to take the divisional title from them this season. So the Lions are right back on tip-top form by the look of that performance in Baltimore, and once again look like the team everybody's going to have to beat, possibly not only in that division. Like I say, it also marks the Lions for me as a really top team that everybody will have to worry about come the postseason. Because on that performance, they're an absolute lock to make the postseason. And if they play like that in the postseason, they're going to be a tough out for anybody. It really was a near perfect performance. The O line was superb here. Having struggled in week one, they were better in week two, but they were just in a different league this week. The Tate Ratledge and Christian Mahogany in particular at guard, and Graham Glasgow deserves credit too. The interior of that O line, we know how good Penny Sewell is on the outside, but those three were superb in this game. It allowed Goff time to find his receivers, but more than that, it allowed Gibbs and Montgomery, Sonic and Knuckles, particularly the latter Knuckles on this occasion, to grind the Ravens defense into submission. The defense was decent too, particularly the D line. Pass rush got going later in the game, and certainly gave Lamar Jackson enough trouble. Multiple sacks there, I think it was six. Um, and they seemed to get on top of the Ravens O line late in the game, as that unit seemed to tire and the Lions didn't. Um, the Lions get two home games now against the beaten up Bucks, who are so badly plagued by injuries this season, then the Vikings. If they play like they did against the Ravens, then 4-1 could well be on the cards. The only caveat I have about the Lions is that the secondary still gives up big plays too often. So that is one area they could look to improve on after the Ravens game. But that's nitpicking. They were superb in this game, and that makes the result makes it a really good week winning in Baltimore. But the style of it was so impressive. Right, next up, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills got to 3-0 by beating the struggling Dolphins in week three, but in truth, this was a far from convincing win. To use a boxing analogy, heavy blows were traded between the two early, then the Bills jabbed away at the Dolphins to build a lead, but were never able to deliver the knockout blow until a late interception led to the game clinching field goal. The Bills D had so many opportunities to get the Dolphins off the field, but could not get the job done on third and even fourth down on one occasion. That could be an issue that comes back to haunt them come the postseason when they're up against good, strong teams every week. And they were helped out by a massive late hit on the kicker penalty to keep another stalled offensive drive going late in the game. You have to say, without Ed Oliver and Matt Milano, there is an excuse for the defense struggling in this game, but they need those guys back, and they need to be able to get the opposition off the field on those key downs. But they are 3-0 and in control of the AFC East already, well in control. So can already begin to see a faint outline of the postseason on the horizon. They look again like the Lions. They look one of the if you're thinking who are the 14 teams that are going to make the postseason, well, the Lions and the Bills certainly look like two. So third up with a good week this week is the Los Angeles Chargers. They got another huge AFC win, and that puts them firmly in control of that division, like the Bills. And they are showing strength across all areas of their roster, which has to stand them in good stead going forward. Justin Herbert and his receiving core are really beginning to carry the load now for the Chargers, whereas pre-season they looked like a team that would run the ball well to get wins. The Chargers do have injury issues to deal with, notably from this week. Najee Harris has gone down with an Achilles, probably out for the season. And the Chargers O-line is really banged up too, and that showed up in this game. But their D is looking pretty good, and that could be what they need to lean on as they travel to New York to face the Giants before hosting the Commanders in Week 5. Even if they only win one of those two games, they'll still be top of their division after Week 5. And if you'd offered them that pre-season, they'd have said thank you very much. So they have the look of another team that are post-season bound. I wouldn't say they're quite a lock as the other two, but they're on their way. Right, next up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Picture for the Bucs is similar to that of the Chargers, as they look to have a strong all-round roster. That strength across the board allowed them to survive a comeback from the Jets. Block field goals and whatever. That was the theme of the week, wasn't it? In Week 3 to get to 3-0. But they continue to be snake bitten in terms of injuries. Edge rusher Khalid Yancey got hurt last week, and they're talking about him possibly coming back for the postseason, but he's done for the regular season. They played this game without three starters on their O-line. Tristan Wirfs, who's not played at all this season, Luke Goedeke, who went out in Week 1, and same with Cody Mork. Mork is another one who's gone for the season. This has also been done without receivers Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan. And now Mike Evans is going to be out for the next few weeks at least with a hamstring injury. So they might get Godwin back instead of Evans. So it might be yin and yang in that. But how up to speed is Godwin going to be, having missed so much time? The good news is that the Bucks hold a 2-game lead in what is looking like a pretty weak division right now. But the next few games are the tough part of their schedule and will certainly be tough sledding for them if they don't get some of their key offensive personnel back. That O-line in particular has to get stronger, has to get some of their people back and play better. Otherwise, Mayfield's going to have to perform miracles, particularly given the state of his receiver core at the moment. They can't lean on, amazing as Ed Buka's been, the rookie, they can't lean on him too much, surely. Their next two games are at home to the Eagles and at Seattle. So they're 3-0 now. If they could get to 4-1 after Week 5, that will keep them firmly in control of the NFC South. But that Eagles game is going to be tough, and going to Seattle is always tough. So, it could be they fall back to 3-2. But even if they did that, they're probably still going to be leading the division. Right, quick drink, and then we'll go on to the next one. Another 3-0 team, the Indianapolis Colts. They comfortably beat the Titans, and with the Texans' current dire form, who went into the season as the pre-season favourites to win the division, they can now be seen as real postseason contenders. Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor continue to perform to the highest levels, and their hopes of winning this division are increasing significantly week on week. Week 4 will see their toughest test of the season so far as they head to LA to face the Rams on the road, before home games against the Raiders and Cardinals. If we're throwing it forward, as I did with others, and I'm going to start doing more and more now, 2 wins from the next 3 would keep this season's surprise package well on track for a divisional title. Less than that, and they risk slipping back into the race for the postseason. So if they can get to 5-1, that would be brilliant for them. Even 4-2 won't be too bad, but 5-1 is what they should be aspiring to. So they've had another good week, and another team that looks on course for the playoffs already. Washington Commanders are the next team up. Ordinarily, this would have been a routine win over the Raiders that would have been expected. Excuse me. But the significance of this Commanders win was that they got it without quarterback Jayden Daniels. And that's what makes this win significant. It sends a message to that roster they can win without him. Whereas, so many teams with such a star quarterback, we'll hear about other teams that in this regard um, later. But Marcus Mariota came in and did what you would hope for from a veteran quarterback. And a pick and mix running game helped the offense put up 41 points against the Raiders. To do that with a backup QB in place, score 41 in any game is a great effort. It was Trosky Merritt, Chris Rodriguez, Deebo Samuel. They pretty much used a variety of people on their running game. Jeremy McNichols even had chipped in with a big play. So, they did it without Daniels, and that really sends a message. With the Eagles winning again, this keeps the Commanders one game back of in the NFC East and well in the wild card race in the NFC at this early stage of the season. So their 2-1 start has put them in a good position. Right, San Francisco 49ers. A 1-point win over the Cardinals gets the 49ers to 3-0. They've done remarkably to get to 3-0 and makes it 2 wins with Mac Jones, not Purdy at quarterback. So another team that's doing it with their backup. And they reached this point without much of their receiving talent either. In what I always suspected was going to be a keenly contested division, wins within this division are going to be huge. So this one over the Cardinals is so much bigger than the margin of victory for sure. The 49ers host the Jags before another massive in-division game at the Rams in Week 5. Beating the Jags looks a must, as they will do well to take down the Rams if they haven't got the likes of George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk back. With Mac Jones struggling with a knee injury late in the win over the Cardinals, it remains to be seen whether Brock Purdy or him will be healthy enough to start for them in Week 4. They will need one of them. Surely you can't do it with a QB3. They will also want good news regarding Nick Bosa's health. Well, they haven't got that. He looks like he's done for the season. So that's another blow to them. Yeah, they've been I said the Bucs were snake bitten with injury. Well, the 49ers were last season, and it's continuing this season. But they've got to 3-0, and that's a remarkable achievement. So that this week's win over the Cardinals has to be put them in the good week category for sure. So another one we're back up. Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings' Week 3 win carries the same level of significance as that of the Commanders, as they were another team to get that win without their starting quarterback. Now, how established is J.K. McCarthy as a quarterback? Well, we might find out. An incredible defensive performance was the key to their routing of the Bengals in Week 3, though, most notably from Isaiah Rodgers, who had the game of games. If he's going to dream of having a better game, it's going to be a mighty good dream. But Carson Wentz was another vet who showed up well as a backup here. And Jordan Mason more than picked up the slack on the ground after Aaron Jones went down hurt in Week 5. Boy, have they made a good move by getting him. The Vikings now head to Dublin to play the Steelers before a London meeting with the Browns. So plenty of travelling coming up for them. With them being in such a tough division, they may need to win both of those across the pond games to keep pace in the NFC North. And Wentz will be a quarterback for both of those games. If they did win both of those games, and then they're on bye in Week 6, the question would have to be asked, who starts in Week 7? Quarterback controversy brewing? Quite possibly. But this win, again, like I say, with the backup in place, and they absolutely, trashed another team with their backup in Cincinnati. So, what a great week for the Vikings. Right. First time they've appeared in this piece this season, and I doubt there'll be many appearances if we're being honest. Sorry, but it's the Cleveland Browns. For the Browns to take down a quality team like the Packers make this a really good result for the Browns. It's the shock result of the season so far. And once again, the Browns' D, and most notably their D line, was by far their strongest asset in getting them their first win of the season. It doesn't change the overall picture for the Browns this season. They still do not have an offense good enough to win them games, and the defense will allow them to shock some, especially at home, which is what happened here and will likely happen to another fancy visiting team at some point this season. Message to the Browns front office here. Do everything you can to keep this D-line together, then go and draft as much offensive talent as you can in 2026. That's got to, it seems simple, but the Browns have a history of not doing the simple thing. So, but that's what surely they must be looking to do. Two more to come in good week. There's plenty of teams had a good week this week. And the next one up are the reigning champion Philadelphia Eagles. Now, they should be expected to win home games, but this win was important due to the comeback nature of it. And that Jalen Hurts and the passing game got them this win rather than the running game and the ever reliable tush push. Hurts deserves credit for his passing performance here. He doesn't often get credit for being a passer, but he deserves it here. But more so, I would say AJ Brown was the turning point in this game. He was the real game changer for them. He absolutely manned up in the second half and dominated the opposing corners as he won contested catches, more and more of them to get his team back in the game. The Eagles are 3-0 now, but still look well short of the levels from last season. If they can win games without being anywhere near their best, that could be a scary prospect for the rest of the league. So on to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have now beaten the Giants, but they simply had to have this one to give themselves something to build on rather than suffering a debilitating blow to their season prospects. They've got it. Now they need to get the likes of Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice back as soon as possible. When they get them back, the Chiefs will once again be back amongst the very best teams in the league. They're 1-2 now. If they'd lost to the Giants and gone to 0-3, it would have been a double blow because losing to the Giants is bad. Being 0-3 would be a horrific prospect for the franchise of the decade in the Chiefs. So that's the last team that had a good week. Let's move on to the bad week, guys. Another drink before I do. The Houston Texans. Oh dear. Their loss to the Jags was by far their worst showing of the season. And given the Texans' look of a team whose team is spiraling downwards, they're getting worse every week and could get out of control if they don't turn this around quickly. And those comments also apply to quarterback CJ Stroud. He is also seeing his form spiral as he continues to look vulnerable and is losing confidence behind this Texans O-line. The Texans have to find a way to get this O-line playing better, and we'll also need Joe Mixon back at quarterback at some point to ease the pressure, literally and figuratively, on Stroud. Unless one or both of these things happen, the Texans' struggles look set to continue. They now have a Week 4 meeting with the Titans. Neither team's won a game, so it has to be must-win for both, but particularly the Texans, who are fancying to win the division pre-season. Otherwise, they'll be 0-4 ahead of a road trip to Baltimore. So, in theory, 0-5 is staring them right in the face, and then they're toast for the season, basically. So they have to win in Week 4. Next up in bad week, Cincinnati Bengals. Week 3 was a catastrophe for the Bengals. In the first game without Joe Burrow as their starter, his backup Jake Browning was poor in this game, but he was far from alone as the Bengals put up a horror show of errors to capitulate badly in this game. They're now 2-1 on the season, so they're still in plus territory. So all is far from lost. But a road trip to Denver and then hosting the Lions mean they'll need to bounce back big time from this all-round horror show. The offense will need to really click in both those games to score against that tough Broncos D and to keep pace with that Lions offense. So that 2-3 is distinctly possible for a team that started 2-0 and has lost their starting quarterback. So bad week for the Bengals. Green Bay Packers, I've got them in the bad week. After a superb first 2 weeks of the season, the Packers fell to a loss in Cleveland that has undone some of the great work they did in those first 2 games, and particularly given the Lions' performance. Yes, the Packers had injuries on their O-line that hurt them this one, but teams like the Chargers and Bucks found a way to overcome such issues, whereas the Packers could not do so. This looked like a clear path to 3-0 for the Packers. The good news is the offense gets a great opportunity to get back on track in Dallas next week against that day. Anybody should have a chance ahead of their Week 5 bye. So they could well get to 3-1 and then have a rest up week to try and get healthy and sort themselves out to stay in competition for that strong division title. Right, next up in the bad week, Atlanta Falcons. Any team in the NFL that gets blanked makes it a pretty bad week for them. But for the Falcons to such a rate to one of the poorest NFL teams, make this a really bad week for the Dirty Birds. This performance was unfathomable and unexpected. Maybe the Falcons thought they would just roll over Carolina in this one, and complacency led to this disastrous showing. It's happened before, it'll happen again. Don't know, trying to find a reason because it's just, you can't fathom it. It's certainly one the Falcons need to put behind them and quickly before they host the Commanders in week 4. Lose that one and they will go into their own bye week in low spirits. Right, next up, bad week. Go NFC East. Dallas Cowboys. I told all Cowboy fans not to see their Giants win as indicative of them being a good team. That was a highly exciting game between two bad teams that, just gave up big play after big play. And this loss to the Bears backs up my case that the Cowboys will not make the postseason. This Cowboys defense is not bad. It's not awful. It's not disastrous. In fact, I just can't find words to describe how bad it is. Atrocious might be another one. Calamitous. You keep going. And when your D is leakier than a rusty old boat, you certainly could do without your star wide receiver CeeDee Lamb getting hurt as he did in this game. High ankle sprain. They don't recover quickly, and if you try to come back too soon, it just gets worse and worse. So that's not good for them either. With Micah Parsons and the Packers heading back into Dallas as a potentially angry team, Parsons, will have plenty to prove, and that the whole team after losing to the Browns, they're going to come in with their angry head on. The Dallas team needs to show up for that one to avoid another costly defeat. But they're on the slide, the Cowboys. Staying in the same division, the New York Giants. After a stellar offensive performance in week 3 from Russell Wilson and co against the poor Cowboys D, the Giants were brought right back down to earth through the crash against the good defensive team that is the Chiefs with Steve Spagnuolo and Andy Reid, plotting their downfall. It always looked like it was going to happen, and it did. Look, it was only the Chiefs' injuries that gave the Giants a chance of beating the Chiefs in this game, but failure to come even close to doing so shows you where the Giants are right now. Right, let's go to the last team that I've got in the bad week. That's Miami Dolphins. A qualified bad week for the Dolphins as they once again put up an improved showing on the road against one of the better teams in the league, but ultimately fell to their third loss of the season to put them way back from said Bills in their division and already being at the back of the pack in the AFC wildcard race. 9-5 from this point is now a minimum requirement, maybe 10-4 if they're going to make the postseason, making their hosting of the Jets on Monday Night Football in week 4 pretty much a must-win game. Lose that one and the trade vultures will be circling the corpse of the Dolphins season to pick off the best bits. Tyreek Hill, for instance. So they're the good and bad. Got a couple of other notes here before I close off. Although I remain far from convinced by the Steelers, they are now 2-1, have a share of the division lead in the AFC North, and saw both their rivals for the divisional title lose in week 3, which makes it a pretty good week for them. The Ravens lost at home, but one thing that may be a concern going forward, and I've kind of touched on this earlier, is firstly the Bills and now the Lions have taken over games against them in the fourth quarter. So are they tiring late in games, particularly in the trenches? And also notably, and this is a question that might be asked of running back Derrick Henry. In week 1, he had 123 yards and a touchdown in the first half, but just 46 yards and a touchdown in the second half. All of those yards and that touchdown coming on one play before fumbling late against the Bills. Was that down to tiredness? He had a rare, productive game against the Browns in week 2, and then in week 3 against the Lions, 37 yards and a touchdown in the first half, and then virtually nothing in the second half, 13 yards, and but one was for a touchdown again in the second half, and then another late costly fumble. Now, you can call it a hell of a play by Hutchinson to knock the ball out, but that's 2 in 3 games. Am I reading too much into this? Quite possibly, quite probably. But it's just something the Ravens will need to monitor going forward. So that's week 3 done and dusted. Normally I go through power rankings and MVP and offensive rookie of the year in this, but this has been quite a long piece. So I'm going to wrap it up there for good week, bad week in week 3. So let's see who can get a good or bad week 4 to appear here next week. See you soon.